It's a 60-minute drive for a 60-minute game. After all the miles we've traveled, we're almost there. After all the hours we've worked, one more can make us legends. After all.
Good morning and welcome to The Last Word. I am Jeff Barnes and also Joe Cardozo in the house. We're light one person in this morning, but we don't keep it rolling, right? So, Joe, exciting week again of college football.
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning, Jeff. Happy to be back, man. And shout out to Greg for sliding in my spot last week and coming off the bench and throwing for a couple of TDs and 300 yards. But yeah, yesterday was exciting, man. We had some really good matchups. A lot of teams that were on upset alert that pulled it out. A lot of teams that were on upset alert that didn't pull it out. But definitely a great week of college football. And I don't know about you, but yesterday really made me feel like college football's back.
Yeah, second full week. We got a lot to talk about. We're going to rush through this a little bit because we got another show behind us. Once again, NFL starts today. We're in the house. We're moving the chains right after this. It's your host, Ashmir Prasad. Listen, I'm excited about it. It's week 3 of college football. It's been action-packed so far. We got a lot of great stories to talk about. We'll run through some of the scores real quick. Once again, so many games. We can't throw it all on one graphic, but we're going to get through this best we can. There's a lot to talk about. Of course, USC dominant over Stanford, 56-10. Wake Forest with the win over Vandy, 36-20. Purdue goes into Morgantown and beats Va Tech 24-17. How about this one? Okay, FCS in the house. Stand up, FCS. James Madison goes into Virginia and takes the dub. All right, how about that? FCS in the house. Ole Miss 37-20 over Tulane. Oregon pulls it out in a much-needed win over Texas Tech because you could not go into the Big 12 losing to Texas Tech. Iowa wins the battle of Iowa over Iowa State 20-13. How about App State giving North Carolina a run for its money with the double overtime victory for North Carolina 40-34. And of course, the Oklahoma Sooners getting a gritty win over SMU 28-11. But it's time for the premier matchups. So let's start, of course. Second week in a row, we're going to kick off with this team. They're killing it right now. We're talking about Prime and the Buffaloes. All right. Let's talk about it. We said last week they were going to pull this victory out. It was a little more hard fought than I thought. I knew Nebraska would struggle to score. They did mightily. But how about Colorado coming through in the end? You talk about Shoutout Sanders, another amazing performance. But I had to highlight Xavier Weaver. And the reason being is I've been, here in Florida. I've been at a lot of USF games. I've seen Xavier Weaver when he was at USF. I saw Jimmy Horn Jr. when he was at USF. These two guys are making a big difference for this Colorado program. Shoutout Sanders is enjoying having these young men transfer over and play for him because they're catching a lot of balls for him. Xavier Weaver, 10 catches yesterday, 170 yards and a touchdown. Joe, what's your thoughts on this matchup?
Man, like you said, Jeff, I think that the start of that game, Colorado definitely struggled a little bit. Nebraska's defense played the best it's played all season within this little 2-game window. I think if you're Matt Rule, go back to the drawing board, but really impressed with Colorado and their ability to make adjustments. I mean, one thing we talked about at the beginning of the season was Coach Prime has a really good veteran coaching staff, guys that have NFL experience. I mean, shoot, his offensive coordinator is a former head coach from Kent State. They made those adjustments to what Nebraska was doing. We're able to put some points on the board, solid win. The atmosphere was electric. As a guy who lives in Colorado now, recently just moved out here, a lot of Insta Buff fans out here, but they definitely are loving what they're seeing. And I mean, I'm even falling for the hype and falling into it. It's like a movie, Jeff. I mean, following Colorado on social media, they post almost everything they do, the lead up, the build up to the game. It's personal was the theme. You saw pregame where Nebraska, the players and coaches were having a huddle in the middle of the field, standing on top of the Buffalo logo. Shoutout Sanders was having none of that, broke it up, even flashes Roley in front of one of the Nebraska players. I mean, it was just awesome. Awesome game. 2-0, man. 2-0 Colorado. Already beat last season's win total. You got to like what you're seeing from the Buffs.
Absolutely. Listen, this program is on the right track. Okay, 2-0, two big wins. We talked about the TCU win last week. This one was expected, right? Nobody expected them to be the underdog this week. They were the favorite, but they went out there and they did what they had to do. Nebraska's defense is tough. Okay, we've said that was their biggest problem is scoring points. They weren't going to beat Colorado at 14. Everybody knew that. But they made it real tough on them. I think what the best thing that they did to Colorado was they took away this running game. So you couldn't, it had to be Shador Sanders lighting him up. They held, I think, 55 yards for Edwards yesterday, and most of that came on a big run. So I think what you're seeing is certain teams are understanding how to play them. They're playing to their strengths. They're trying to say, okay, you don't have the strongest running game. We're going to take that away. Shador Sanders, you're going to have to go out there and light us up every time. We're going to put pressure on you. We're going to do a lot of things. They did that early. They were able to adjust. I would like to see a little more from the offense in Colorado. If there's one thing I do have a critique about, it's just too much sideways in the running game. I think it's one of the reasons why they struggle. Sometimes you got to get down and dirty and really find ways to move forward. That's part of the problem. You know, as an offensive coordinator, when you spread, you get so into the zone, which is sideways running because you're in the gun. And sometimes you got to get under center. Sometimes you got to get in the pistol and give that running back a chance to get downhill. And I don't see that in their running game enough. That's something they need to do. And as I was at the USF last night, I saw the same thing out of them yesterday. There was times where we were watching that game and you're watching them go sideways. And sometimes the running game, you got to get dirty. You got to get downhill, especially when it's a gritty front. So I saw that yesterday with Nebraska and Colorado. At some point, they got to look at their running game and say, okay, sometimes we got to put them in the pistol. Sometimes we got to get them under center and let them go over there and let our running backs go downhill and just fight for yards instead of running sideways and trying to squeeze and cut and do all that stuff. Sometimes you got to let your linemen just knuckle up and move bodies off the ball. But kudos to Colorado. Big win. You got the first one at home. You got the fans all hyped up. They deserved it. Tough. The matchups get tougher from here on out.
Absolutely.
So, but great win. Great way to kick it off. Another way to kick it off is to slide right over to another big matchup. We're talking about Jimbo Fisher running back to the state of Florida and greeted unceremoniously by the Miami Hurricanes. 48-33, Miami takes the W. Tyler Van Dyke, 21 to 30, 374, 5 touchdown passes. Man, I'm telling you what, if there's a guy who's taking more heat than some of these other coaches that are out there, it's Jimbo Fisher. Like, he got the big contract, got all these top recruiting classes, and you come out with some losses like this, doesn't make the fans over there at College Station very happy. How about you, Joe?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, I said it yesterday in our private chat that we have for NBS that Jimbo Fisher, to me, is a joke. I mean, you think about the recruiting classes this guy has had, the amount of money Texas A&M is paying him, and the results just aren't there. I would also say, I know people use this phrase all the time, but I'm going to say it, and I mean it. Miami Hurricanes are back. I mean, that offense looked explosive. They scored in all 3 phases. The defense played well, made big plays when it needed to be. Van Dyke, who I'll talk a little bit more about later in our statement segment, had a great game. You saw a lot of good things and positive things to build off of Miami. And I think the biggest thing was the fan. The fan base are there. They're starving. I mean, Miami's like the Knicks, the Celtics, and the Lakers in the NBA. When Miami's doing good, it's good for college football. I think a very solid win for the Hurricanes. If I'm Texas A&M, I gotta be looking at Jimbo Fisher with the side eye, wondering if this is the guy for the job for us or not.
Absolutely. I mean, you're not getting the results that you paid for, right? We gave him this big contract. We expected to be in the college football playoff. We haven't been there yet. We expected to have a national championship opportunity. We haven't had that yet. So there's a lot. Hell, you haven't even won your conference. Okay. So there's a lot that you're unpacking with the Jimbo Fisher situation there. I know a lot of people are saying, well, you know, it's not just the coach. No, it's not just the coach. The players have to perform, but it doesn't seem, if you're getting these top recruiting classes that everybody keeps talking about, you're not getting to perform to the best of their ability. And some of them just aren't staying either. That's a whole nother story.
Sure.
Like you're getting them, and if for some reason they don't like your program, that they don't want to stay. So whether it's playing time, whether it's they don't like the atmosphere, whether they don't think they're going to win there, whatever the reason that they're leaving, they hit that transfer portal. I'm out of here. Whatever the reason is, you got to look at it. It starts at the top, right? The head
Yeah.
coach is a guy who's supposed to maintain your roster, who's supposed to maintain that locker room, who makes the players buy in. They're not buying in, Jimbo. Something's wrong. So
absolutely.
And the results are right there on the scoreboard. Big loss to Miami. Shout out to Alonzo Highsmith. I know they're loving it this season so far down there in Miami. Personal note for Alonzo Highsmith is somebody I've met on the scouting trail. So from his days in Cleveland. So I know he's down there in Miami, and they're juiced about the big win. So far, they're still undefeated. Kudos to them. All right. So big matchup right here. And I think all 5 of the matchups we've chose this week to really deep dive into are big. But this one right here set the tone for yesterday. How about Texas going into Tuscaloosa and taking it to the Crimson Tide, 34-24. They're going to go taking it. They only won by 10. No, the tone of that game was set by Texas last night. Quinny Ewers seems to have the juice when it comes to Miami, when it comes to Alabama, because plain and simple, last year when they played them in Texas, they were beating him when he was in the game. He had to get knocked out of the game for Bama to take the lead back. So something about the juice that Quinny Ewers has for the Crimson Tide. He's got that Manziel kind of like vibe where Manziel owned him when he was at Texas A&M for the early part of his career. Well, it seems that way with Quinny Ewers in Texas. He seems to own the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, it was a great game. I mean, this is what you talk about. I mean, it was just the atmosphere. Tuscaloosa on a Saturday night. That is college football. And people are Texas back, and we've been saying it as a joke for I don't know how many years. Feels like forever. Great game. And what really impressed me about this game was, Jeff, in my opinion, Tech won this line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. Offensive line throwing guys around, the defensive line applying pressure, had Alabama's inexperienced quarterback running for life in the game, or at least hitting him and knocking him down, making overthink things because so much pressure was coming. That's something you don't see. I mean, when's the last time you saw an Alabama line defense offensive side get pushed around the way they did yesterday? So I think for Steve Sarkisian, huge win for the Texas program, a huge win. Kudos to them. But I'll tell you this much. I don't think Alabama's out the college football playoff just yet. I mean, how many times have we seen them find their way and sneak their way back in? It's a non-conference loss. It's to a really good team in Texas. If they can run the table for the rest of the season, I don't think all is lost for Crimson Times fans. But if I'm a Texas Longhorn fan, I have to like what I'm seeing. And like you said, their quarterback was on fire, making really plays. All you do with this, if you're the Longhorns, is you build off of this. This is the kind of win that you use this momentum to carry you throughout the rest of the season, and you end things on a high note.
Indeed. Listen, I'm far from writing Alabama off. This is a big loss. I think this is one of the times where the student finally gets the teacher. Okay, Sarkisian been dying to get that win over Saban. Yep. You've had so many chances. You've gotten so many times. You have gotten close, and you haven't been able to pull it off. I think the only person he needs to get even with is now out in Southern California, because he couldn't get him in Oklahoma, right? Yeah. So I think right now you've exercised that demon. You finally got the win over Saban. But can you do this consistently if you're Sarkisian? Because Sarkisian has always been a good coach when it came to winning games, but he's never been a good coach when it came to winning big games consistently. And I think this is one of those times you finally did that. You won the big game, right? You got past Bama. Well, you have to get past Bama every year now because you're going to be SEC next year. So that's a whole nother story. But yeah, get used to seeing that guy across the sideline from you. But can you do this consistently? Okay, so you got the big win now. You got to go back in the Big 12 play. You got to be able to go out there and consistently beat now the Oklahomas, the Oklahoma States, and all of those guys consistently. Not just, beat them this year and go out there and blow a game against them next year. Okay, so he's got to go out there and do that. Okay, so that's one thing. And the good thing for you, Lincoln Riley is not in Oklahoma anymore. But, you still have to finish. They couldn't do it last year without Lincoln Riley there. Remember, Oklahoma beat him again. Yeah. So right now, I think he has to come out the rest of the season and continue to win game and stack on those wins and get Texas back to where Texas fans are loving it. Right now, they're loving life right now. They haven't had a big win. They haven't had a big win like that in a long time.
Yeah,
so
since the Vince Young era.
Yeah. So this is a big this is a big moment for Texas right now for that program, and they have to consistently do this. They do this, they'll be back. He'll be back in the great. He'll be back in the good graces of the boosters there, because they're going to love the fact that they're finally going to be competing for not only a conference title but a national title if this keeps up. So.
Yeah, one more thing about this game too, Jeff. I think that the injuries in the secondary to Alabama definitely were glaring. I mean, Texas guys were wide open on a lot of those big pass plays. So I think that's something that's going to be addressed by Alabama. And you've got to know their next practice is going to be brutal. With all those false starts that the Tide had, you know that Nick Saban is going to be up those guys' butts all week long. And I expect a big performance next week and a bounce-back game from Alabama. But we got to give Texas their props and let them enjoy this win.
Absolutely. And we know that's a guy that loves the details, right?
Absolutely.
He's all detail driven. So when you have a game like that that's very sloppy, it comes to penalties, when it comes to blown coverages and mistakes, assignment mistakes, that's something that he's going to beat into them all week long. They're going to be in film all week, and you're probably going to have Nick Saban taking over a couple of meeting rooms, because that's when he gets that incensed about certain things, he will sit in the back and he will give you a hard ass time. If you ever listen to some of his coaches, if you ever had a chance to see some of the coaching sessions or the clinics that some of his assistants give, and they will tell you, yes, he's one of the hardest guys on film, because he will sit in the back and call you out if he doesn't like what you're telling. So if you're going through film and you're telling your players, we got to fix this and this is how we fix it, and he doesn't like the answer, he's going to go,
absolutely.
And then you got the professor in the back critiquing your lecture. It's just never fun.
No pressure there at all.
So we have 3 matchups in, 2 big matchups to go, plenty more to come. Remember, right after this, Moving the Chains coming your way. Big week here on Team NBS with football coverage, college football now, NFL football right behind us. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more of The Last Word.
In 2006, we founded Yeti Coolers with a simple mission: build the cooler we use every day if it existed. One that was built for the serious outdoor enthusiasts rather than for mass discount retailers. One that could take the abuse we knew we'd put it through, out in the field and on the water. One that simply wouldn't break. We decided early on that production innovation would come from necessity and first-hand experience, not from market research and data analysis. Today, Yeti products perform when it matters most. Whether that be an excursion into the remote Alaskan wilderness, chasing redfish on the Gulf Coast, or just getting together with friends in the backyard, we make gear that helps you stay out longer, travel farther, and live harder. # built for the wild.
Enjoy 40% off site-wide. Vitable takes the guesswork out of feeling good. Get your own personalized daily vitamin pack safely delivered to your doorstep every month. Take their online quiz to find out which vitamins and minerals can support your personal needs based on your own diet and lifestyle. # only what you need, nothing that you don't. All vitamins are manufactured in Australia at the highest quality standard. Ingredients come in the best form for their absorption by your body. Enjoy 40% off site-wide using code NBS40 at checkout.
You are watching The Last Word with Team NBS Media. And now back to Joe, Jeff, and Brock.
Joe and Jeff in the house. Brock slid out the door a little early this morning, so it's just us two today. We're here rocking and rolling. We're here for you. So we got 2 more games to go through before we get into our player awards. And, of course, statements from this weekend, and then we'll look ahead next week, and then you get to see us slide off into the sunset. Not so fast. We get to slide off into the realm of NFL football with Moving the Chains coming up right after this. So, Joe, let's slide into a matchup people were worried about all week, right? Baylor's quarterback is hurt. Utah's hurt. The quarterback is hurt. Can they beat Baylor? Baylor coming off the big loss last week. Can they rebound? Well, Baylor didn't rebound, and they darn near pulled off the upset. Right? Utah, they pull it out though, 20-13. Right? Jaquindon, I forgot his last name, believe it or not. Jaquindon goes in, 24 carries, 144 yards. So big matchup there. Big win for the Utes despite the injuries.
Yeah, I mean, Cam Rising out with that torn ACL still. People kind of wondered, could Utah hold on and hold the fort down until he came back? I heard some rumblings about him possibly playing in this game. Obviously, it didn't happen. But yet again, Utah finds a way to get a win, man. Kyle Willingham just getting it done out there in the Mountain State. So they get that win. I think for Baylor in that game, I mean, it came down to the last drive. Obviously, you had that one play where the receiver catches the ball, makes a nice run down the sidelines. Smart heads-up football, gets out with 1 second left in the game. You have one last chance to win it if you're Baylor. I thought it was pass interference, but they don't call pass interference against Miles Battle in the end zone. So Utah escapes with the win. Baylor is now 0-2. It has to have a bad taste in their mouth. I mean, you had that really big upset loss to Texas State last week. Now you come back and you lose to Utah, back to the drawing board for the Baylor Bears. But like I said, if I'm Utah, I got to feel good. My star quarterback's been out with an injury. He has to feel like he has plenty of time to recover. There's not that much pressure for him to come back because now the team is undefeated, and they're also showing they can perform at a pretty high level without him. I mean, it's college football. You're going to have those kind of wins. If I'm Baylor, definitely have to be feeling like, man, we let 2 games slip away from us. We have to right the ship and get things right immediately.
Absolutely. And, I mean, they're not far behind in Big 12 play. I mean, realistically, yes, you've lost 2 games, for the most part, out of conference, right? They don't really kill you. They may kill you in national rankings. They may kill you for playoffs, but it doesn't kill you for the Big 12. You can still get back into it for the Big 12. But 0-2 was never a good start.
Nope.
It never is. Okay, so you needed this win. You had a wounded opponent. You had to jump on them. They jumped out to a lead, but you didn't bury them. Like, this is what happens when you don't bury an opponent. You come out, you get a lead, you're fighting to maintain this lead, and all of a sudden they get just enough to pull off the victory, and you walk out there. Nobody ever feels good about any game that you say we should have, because usually when they say you should have, it means you lost. Okay, so
I like that. Put that in a T-shirt there, Jeff. I like that.
As a coach, you say that a lot, right? We say that a lot. When we come out of a game, we go, man, we should have done this, and we should have done that. If you're saying that, you lost, because you never say that in a win. You never go, man, we won, but we should have. We got the win. All right, we got some things to fix. We'll move on. The teams that says should have always ends up on the short end of the stick, and unfortunately, that's Baylor this week. But you have to take advantage when you have an opponent wounded, and they didn't do that. Okay, we saw it with Nebraska. Then we said that last week. We said, good luck to you beating Colorado after what they just did in TCU. Okay, beating Colorado when you can't score enough points. You had Colorado struggling early, and you couldn't pull it off. Okay, and the same thing here. You had them struggling early, and you couldn't pull it off. And we're going to say this about our next matchup too, because that happened in the next matchup we're going to talk about after this. But it's always the should-haves. Right? We had them down. We could have won this game. We didn't do it. And it was opportunities were there. We didn't take advantage of it. Well, now you're 0-2, and you're looking at the season going, man, we must win this game to get it turned around. We must do this. So kudos to Utah for gutting out a win. They found a way.
On the road.
Yeah. On the road, no quarterback. You're fighting through. You really never replaced one of your main weapons. You lost your tight end in the NFL draft. So they haven't really replaced him yet. So even when your Cam Rising does come back, he doesn't have the guy he was forcing the ball to last year in this offense. So you need the running game to come through. It came through for them yesterday. We saw 144 yards on the ground, not a lot in the air. All right. So Utah still got some problems. I think right now what you're looking at Utah is saying, okay, even when you get Cam Rising back, is it enough to beat USC? Because USC
question.
Now, USC is rolling right now.
Oh my God!
Points. They're playing tough defense. Do you have enough to beat USC? You beat Florida. Florida was a very flawed team.
Yeah,
I'll be honest with you.
I agree. It wasn't the same matchup as it was last year when they had Richardson at quarterback at all.
No, and honestly, with Mertz, they're running that offense like they still have Richardson, and Mertz is a totally different quarterback. So that's a shame on Florida for trying to beat Utah with that game plan that they had. It wasn't going to happen. So you're looking at right now, what is Utah going to do the rest of the season? I think what you saw is what Utah is going to be. They're going to be a tough defense, grind it out kind of offense, and win games with just grit and toughness, because I don't see a lot of explosive playmakers on this offense. They have enough in the running game to maintain control of the ball and maintain, as far as the tempo of the game. But they have a lot to be desired as far as big-time playmakers. They're going to make big plays for you on that offense. That's where they're going to struggle. USC has plenty of that. They do not.
Gosh.
So, that's the big problem.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Jeff, even when Cam Rising, does come back, okay, now what? Great. You're back. We have an experienced quarterback who's a dual threat. It's going to take him a couple of games to get comfortable coming back from the injury, trust that knee, all that good stuff. But who are the weapons? Who's he throwing to? Who's the running backs? When you bring up a great point, let's say they do bring back Cam Rising and he comes back and he's playing, he's under center. What does he have to work with will be my question for Utah.
Yeah, it's not a lot. I mean, he's got a lot of young guys, and they have some talented players. But are they game breakers? I don't see game breakers there. And honestly, they didn't have a lot of game breakers last year when they won the Big 12. Won the Pac-12. I think what you're looking at is they're a very good defensive team. That seems to be the staple on the Willingham is they're going to have a very tough, gritty defense that's going to keep you from lighting them up. However, they've always at least had a playmaker or two on offense that helps complement that defense, that allows them to score enough points to match their opponents. And they don't have that right now. Okay. The tight end matchup they had last year with Dalton Kincaid was tough. Nobody could cover Kincaid last year. So it made it real easy when Cam Rising was out there able to throw and run and do a lot of the things that Cam Rising was able to do, extend plays. You don't see that right now. There's no Cam Rising, there's no Dalton Kincaid, and none of the guys that they have match the X factor that Kincaid was. So Kincaid was your playmaker last year. They had a strong running game. They have a strong running game still. They just don't have that playmaker that's going to go out there and be an X factor in the passing game, or that's just such a dynamic rusher that you could play off of it with your quarterback. They tried to run zone read yesterday, and he was effective at it, but they weren't, lighting it up. They weren't killing people with it, where you were like, oh, man, Baylor's really having a hard time with this running game. They had a hard time with the running game overall, but it wasn't enough. And it was more in the second half where they kind of wore Baylor down a little bit. But you saw 20 points. They just got enough to win. And that's kind of what it's going to be until they get at least their quarterback back. It's going to be just enough to win. But that's not going to be enough for USC. Yeah. That may not be enough for UCLA. As you saw yesterday, they finally found their quarterback. So the Pac-12,
there.
The Pac-12 is going to be a lot more competitive than people thought. You see, Colorado is very good. People didn't think that shit about Colorado. They think about a lot more about them now. Well, guess what? UCLA is going to be tough now that they finally figured out their quarterback situation. We already knew what USC was building into something. So Utah's going to have some real competition. Oregon, that's a whole nother one, pulled out a victory yesterday. They almost got clipped. Okay. Yeah. So, Pac-12 is going to be a really competitive conference in its final state before it kind of gets spread out.
Yeah, definitely going out with a bang for sure.
Oh, yeah. So, now to our final matchup. I know Greg has been eagerly anticipating this one.
Morning, Greg.
All right, so we're going to talk about the Notre Dame Fighting Irish getting the win down in North Carolina and down in Raleigh. All right, so this was a really good game, I must say. The weather delay kind of hampered the beginning because it was a really tough, gritty defensive battle at first. We saw why North Carolina State was able to kind of slow this. They really slowed Hartman down to a crawl in that first half. They did a lot to confuse him. and overall they slowed down the running game. They slowed down the Irish. They went into that weather delay. They came out. They did pick it up some. Estimate with the huge run. He had the big game. I'll put that graphic back up because you saw 14 carries, 134 yards, 2 TDs. He had an 80-yard touchdown run, I believe, in this game. So the running game came through for the Irish, but overall, this was a tough, gritty defensive game at first. It doesn't look like that in the end, but at first they could only score 3 points before the weather delay.
Yeah, I mean, this game was close for a little while. Then in the fourth quarter, Notre Dame just turned it on. When you scored 21 points in the fourth quarter alone, you already know. We just talked about it earlier in the show, Jeff. When you have somebody down, you got to step on their neck and you got to keep your foot on the gas. Notre Dame definitely did that. I think that is another opportunity for us to see how good of a quarterback Hartman really is. You've talked about it before. A lot of Notre Dame fans talked about it before. The best quarterback Notre Dame's had in a long time. Some people might think that's a bold statement to make so early into the season, but I mean, I've watched plenty of Notre Dame football, and I think he's one of the best quarterbacks they've had in a while already. I think that Freeman's got this team clicking on all cylinders. I think that North Carolina State gave it a go. I mean, you have to give them respectable performance, but at the end, the more talented team won. And I think if I'm Notre Dame, again, we talk about this every week, and it really matters in college football and in sports in general. Take the win, stack it up, build the momentum, kind of look at what you can improve on and move on to the next opponent. But I think to win this game on the road, we had a little bit of adversity with the weather. When you think about it, you're locked in, ready for the game to start. It gets delayed. You're in a little bit of a battle. And then in the fourth quarter, you just turn it on and you go home with the W.
Yeah, weather delays are always tough. I deal with them every year here in Florida now. Something I didn't have to deal with in the Northeast a lot. I think all of September, we are on pins and needles every game at the high school level because you don't know if you're going to be delayed. You don't know if you're going to get pushed to another week because, weather delays down here in the South are just way tougher. Lightning, you can't play with lightning in the area. So you have to wait for that to clear. That's at least half an hour every time a strike happens and you're within like an 8-mile radius of the game. So that's something that you deal with down here in the South. They were in weather delay for over an hour, I believe it was, right? Yeah. So they got pushed off a couple of times because of lightning. You saw what it did to the scoreboard yesterday. Their brand new digital scoreboard they installed, they were feeling proud about, got hit by lightning. It's the kind of rough game for them when it comes to not only on the field but off. But they confused Sam Hartman early. The coverages, and it wasn't just him. The offensive coordinator was confused as well. They did a lot to Notre Dame's offense to slow it down, and 95 minutes. Thanks for the accurate. I always rely on Greg for accurate information.
I love details. Nick Saban disciple right there. I love the details. Don't just say delay. Give me an accurate time of the delay, sir.
That's that Marine precision. Simplify, Gunny. So, yeah. I think when you look at Notre Dame, this was a big test for you. You had to go out there. You had to go on the road. It's a tough opponent. People don't give NC State enough credit. They're a tough opponent. I think offensively, they're not a powerhouse, but defensively, they're a very tough opponent. Yeah. They are always, always tough. They throw a lot at you schematically. He had a lot to unpack, but it kind of helps when you have a running game that go along with that you can say, you know what, we're struggling. Let's get the running game going. Their first drive that they scored on, it was more the running game than it was the passing game. They got some gritty runs. They were able to move the line of scrimmage for once because they were struggling early. And when they struggled early and they were put in third and long, that defense was allowed to do a lot of things to Hartman. The first sack, having him check down and throw some passes and some tight coverage where you almost do a pick. So they did a lot to confuse him in third down and long situations. So it was great that they were able to unpack the running game and say, you know what, let's control the tempo. Let's take some of this power away from the defense and then allow Sam Hartman to do what he does. And I think that's, like I said, that's the biggest opponent. Because if they have any one of those quarterbacks they had last year at Notre Dame or the year before, when they had Jack Cohn, it don't matter. They don't win that game.
I agree. And I also get some major Big Ten defense vibes from Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame defense. Flying all around, playmakers, again, kind of in the trenches, defensive tackles, defensive ends, just having their way with their matchups individually. Not having to get cute and do all kinds of crazy blitz packages, just you and the guy in front of you and you beating that guy and applying pressure on the quarterback, shutting down the running lane. So, I mean, if you pay attention to the Notre Dame defense, it looks like an Ohio State and a Michigan defense where guys just flying around, attacking the ball, people just knowing their assignments. And that's something that's only going to get better. So, I mean, if you're a Notre Dame fan, you have to know have defense will travel.
Absolutely. Credit to Al Golden. He's done a great job with that defense. For anybody
Talk about old school.
Yeah. Well, think just a few years ago they had Brian Van Gorder, and Van Gorder was one of those guys that came in highly. Oh, he does all this stuff. He's got that Ravens type mentality, and it was an atrocity. Okay, he had some great players on those defenses, and he couldn't stop people. Okay, Brian Van Gorder. So Al Golden at least understands down and distance how to take somebody's best weapon away and kind of make them earn what they're going to get. You don't see Al Golden's defense getting lit up the way you saw Van Gorder's defense getting lit up. So kudos to Marcus Freeman by saying, I'm going to bring in a coordinator that understands how to stop people and get me a chance to win without having to put up 40 or 50 points every week. Something that his predecessor didn't have in Notre Dame when he kept hiring guys like Van Gorder. So that's a big one. We got to our last matchup. So you want to get into player awards? Because we're getting closer and closer from NFL talk. So let's get into player awards. So who do you have for your player award, Joe?
For me this week, man, I watched this game from start to finish. Just really, really impressed with them. I got to go with Tyler Van Dyke from Miami. Just a great game, an over 200 passer rating, 5 touchdown passes, almost 400 yards. I'm just really impressed. This is a guy that got banged up earlier in the game. He left with the upper body bruise, I want to say. You weren't too sure if he's going to come back, but he knew this was a huge game for the Hurricanes playing against Texas A&M at home. He comes back. Just a really good performance. I mean, if you pay attention to Miami football, there were some rumblings in the offseason about whether he'd transfer out and go to a different school and give up on Miami, but he stuck with it. Something we don't see a lot in this day and age of college football, guys fighting through adversity, and just had a really, really good performance and has Miami fans flying high, not just yesterday, but this season. So for me, that was my player of the week.
Okay. All right. So for me, I'm going to go with a name that people are not too familiar with, Roman Embry, right, from Maryland. This game was on upset alert for most of the first half, right? We're talking about Maryland trailing Charlotte 14-3 at one point in this game. Wow, how could Maryland be losing to UNC Charlotte? Charlotte's a good program, but you would think Big Ten, Maryland, they play all the toughest opponents. They should be able to beat this team. Well, eventually they did. Eventually they turned it on, and it started with Roman Embry. Okay, the running back there in Maryland goes for 20 carries, 162 yards, and a touchdown, but his running ability changed that game. Okay, so that was big. You needed something to lean on. You were struggling early. You could only score 3 points. Tagovailoa, Tua's younger brother. I'm always butchering those last names. So especially the Polynesian names are always one of those things I always throw off. So Tua's younger brother goes out there. He doesn't throw for 200+ yards later in the game in a win. But it started with Roman Embry coming back and getting them back on track in the running game. So kudos to him. And I'm going to give him some flowers because, we could easily go to the big matchups that we've talked about. But this was a big one because we would have been talking about, once again, another mid-major knocking off a top Power 5 program. So they turned it around. Mike Locksley, I know, is excited. They got the win after struggling early. So it started with their running back. So I wanted to throw him his flowers.
Yeah, and that's also a Maryland program, like you talked about with Notre Dame in their previous seasons with their quarterbacks. 3, 4, 5 years ago, Maryland doesn't come back and win that game. They just it's another Terps loss, folded up, jokes and memes about how they could lose to Charlotte. So it shows you what Locksley's been building in University of Maryland for a while there, for them to be able to come back, get things straightened out, and get that win. So salute to them for sure.
Yes, and we're going to make sure we get this in because we don't have Brock to give us his. So Greg is telling us Kansas State Wolford made a big play for the Wildcats in there winning big time. Well, it's almost that time. We're down to the last 12 minutes of the show. And we got to get 2 more things to get through. But first, we got to get through this. And we're talking about the statement. right, Joe. So which player or program made a statement for you yesterday?
For me, I am going to go with the University of Michigan. And you're probably wondering, well, how are you going with them? It's because you're a fan of them. They played UNLV. Who's that? No, it's not about that. It's about not having your head coach and them doing something super unorthodox, switching the person that's being in charge, head coach, by the half, by the quarter, maybe by the moment. It's just classic Jim Harbaugh, not following what everybody else is doing and doing his own thing, but it's working. And it just seems like that team is getting better and better. You watch their quarterback. If you remember the image that a lot of Wolverine fans have is him sitting on the field watching TCU celebrate as they made it to a national championship game, and him saying he wanted to sit there and soak it in and use it as fuel for the offseason. And then he comes out with the free Harbaugh T-shirt and hoodie last week. They made a statement to win for me as far as being able to show that they're a united program. That yes, the head coach is not there and he won't be there for the next 2 games, but we're going to keep this train rolling and keep on trying to achieve our goals, which is to get back into the college football playoff, but this time to actually win it. So that's a team that made a statement to me, a program that made a statement to me yesterday. And then also, I know you're supposed to only pick one, but I'm also going to have to go. I got to stick with my guys, Jeff. I got to say, Colorado, again, a little bit of adversity. I mean, think about it. They were the darlings of college football. Everybody thought that, yeah, Nebraska, that's a tough defense, but you guys should come out there and blow them out. And you guys put up so much points against TCU. Struggled a little bit at the beginning of the game. You figure it out, and you end up getting a win, and you win comfortably. Again, we talk about programs changing the narrative, changing the culture. I know Coach Prime hates talking about culture, but I love talking about culture. And I think that them getting that win and being able to make the adjustments the way they did shows you that team and that program is changing. So my statements yesterday came from University of Michigan. No head coach, but our goals remain the same and our focus remains the same. And then with the Colorado Buffaloes, we're not the same old Buffs.
Greg's letting you know how he feels about that.
Thanks for watching. I can always guarantee at least one view. I appreciate that.
So my statement, it's gonna be headlined by a game, but it's a bigger narrative. Okay, and it goes to the point where every year we talk about with the Power 5 schools, they put these schools on their schedule, and it's a cupcake matchup, and that's a guaranteed 70-7 win. And oh man, that's not even a competitive opponent. Not always. We've watched it every week. We've seen upset specials, right? But how about James Madison going into Virginia and taking the victory? They didn't just go in there and squeeze it out. They took it. All right. We're talking about 368 yards passing, 3 TDs from Jordan McLeod. This is an FCS school. You're going to watch FCS playoffs, and you're going to see James Madison in the FCS playoffs. All right. This is a team that goes up against the North Dakota States and the South Dakotas and all those schools in the FCS playoffs. And we sit here every year, we talk about FCS and FBS. It's not competitive. Well, we've watched FCS programs up and down the slate yesterday. Were competitive, and it may have gotten out of hand later on. You know, and somebody that went to Grambling, you see the G hat in the back. Okay, I was proud for the first half when they were going toe to toe with LSU, and eventually the score ended up exactly what you would expect: big to little. Okay, the Grambling program is still in flux; it's still rebuilding. But for a quarter and a half, you're watching Grambling go toe to toe with LSU. LSU. This was a team that was supposed to be competing for a national championship. Here they are fighting it out in a slugfest with little old Grambling. Right? Grambling's town is only about 5-10 miles big. Okay, it's not a very big town. Okay, the bigger town is Ruston, 5 miles away. Okay, everybody knows Ruston. Everybody knows La Tech. Nobody knows what Grambling is. If you put 99 out of 100 people aren't going to be able to point out Grambling on a map of Louisiana. But here they were, slugging it out with LSU. Here I sat at Raymond James last night watching good old FAMU, Florida A&M, duke it out for 4 quarters. 4 quarters. Throw up your fours, all right, with USF. And granted, USF is not a powerhouse on the FBS level right now. They're rebuilding. But they should win that. Everybody goes, oh, that's a game that they should win. Well, they had to work for it, folks, for 4 quarters. Willie Simmons had that team ready, and for 4 quarters, they were going back and forth with this FBS program. So this is about everybody talking about the competitive level of college football. Once you get past Power 5, it's not competitive. Once you get past FBS, it's not competitive. You need to wake up to college football. There's a lot of talent spread out throughout college football. Some of these coaches are very good at getting players to play. And you saw that in the first 3 weeks when people played at a school that they consider playing down to. Well, guess what? They're sneaking out in those games sometimes with wins or even some cases with losses in the case of Virginia. All right? So they're sneaking out of there with losses and going, what are we doing? Right now, nobody feels good about Virginia's program right now at 0-2, especially with a loss to James Madison, who's considered little brother. Little brother comes in your room and beats your ass. You know it's time for a change. It's time people start waking up to the other levels, the mid-majors, the FCS levels, the Division II levels. There's some good football being played at those levels, folks. Even D3. There's some good football players. There are players that slip through cracks. All right, so college football as a whole is entertaining, not just the top. People get so excited about just college football on ESPN. All they worry about is the top level. You need to watch college football as a whole and fully enjoy what it is, because there's some darn good football being played at more than just the FBS level.
Amen. I'd have to agree with that. I mean, it's just like college basketball. You see how there's more and more upsets. It's very common. And I mean, how many times you fill out a bracket and you pick a 12 over a 5 and you're almost always right? It's because there's a lot of talent. I think with college football, what happens is you bring up a great point, a perfect example. My point is Grambling fighting out with LSU. But then when you get to that second, third quarter and you see the depth LSU has, and the guys from Grambling have been giving maximum effort since the first quarter, of course you're going to get tired. And that's when you start having the mental mistakes, guys that are not doing assignments, or the guy that was really putting pressure is tired now and can't apply the same pressure on the quarterback. So usually it comes down to depth in college football when it comes to the little guys not being able to stay competitive with the big guys for a long period of time. But I would agree with you 100%. College football landscape is definitely more than just SEC, Pac-12, the Big Ten. There's a lot of good football going on. It's entertaining.
Indeed. Well, that's what we want, right? Are you not entertained? I sure as hell am. So before we go and slide into the NFL realm, any matchups you're looking forward to next week?
I'm just looking forward to the whole complete slate of another good set of games, Jeff. And it was really cool having we had 3 or 4 games yesterday that were on an upset alert. 2 of them ended up being the better team that we thought on paper winning, but we also had the upsets. I mean, I did not think that James Madison was going to be able to hold on at all against Virginia. And I really thought Oregon was going to lose that game against Texas Tech, because Texas Tech at home is a tough team to beat as well, because that offense is so potent. I'm just looking for a nice complete slate of games, and I'm also obviously looking forward to like I said, being a new resident of the state, the inner border war, Colorado State, Colorado. It's going to be interesting to see how that matchup goes out as well. So it's going to be fun. I mean, as the season goes on, the clearer the picture will become for college football.
Well, I'm going to tell you what. There's a couple of matchups I already got my eye on. One, LSU, Mississippi State, undefeated Mississippi State. LSU, who's got their first win over Grambling after getting thumped by Florida State. So I know that they want to get off to a good start in the conference. Mississippi State would be a great way to do just that, knocking them off, get some good graces of fans back down there in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, okay? Brian Kelly needs that.
Oh, yeah. Yes, he definitely does. How about another one is Wake Forest, Old Dominion. Old Dominion's been playing some great football, took a tough loss, came back with a big win the other week, 1-1 versus Wake Forest. Wake Forest 2-0. Trying to say we're still here. We don't have Sam Hartman, but we're still winning.
Yeah.
Well, that's a tough matchup. Listen, Old Dominion is not an easy out, and that's one of those teams I talk about mid-majors that's coming up.
I was about to say
Dominion,
that, yeah.
Old Dominion. I used to go to Norfolk State games as a kid, and they would play at Old Dominion Stadium because they had shut down their football program at the time. So I know Old Dominion very well. That program has ascended so fast. And I'm telling you right now, they're going to be tough for a long time. They are building something special, and it'll be nothing short of amazing for them to go and knock off Wake Forest. That would be big.
Write that down.
Yes. So make sure you stay tuned. If you're watching on YouTube, like, subscribe, and stick around, folks, because we got more coming. NFL coverage coming your way, moving the chains. This is our new Sunday format, 2 hours of football, college, sliding right into NFL, getting you ready for some NFL action. But right now, we're going to tune out here on college football with the last word. We had the last word. We're done here with college football. See you next week. That's Joe Cardozo. I'm Jeff Barnes. We'll be back. Make sure you tune in to Moving the Chains coming up next.